Hey guys, how you doing? This is JP Sarri. Welcome again to another episode of Age of Heroes, my podcast. And don't forget, before we go into the details of this podcast today, don't forget you can find this podcast if you're following me on YouTube. You can go to iTunes. You can go to Stitcher. You're an Android, and I have the links below so you can sign up, so you can get your weekly episodes of this podcast. So thank you for your support. So let's dive into the question of today. I was thinking about, sometimes I get this question. And sometimes I talk to people also, a lot of my friends on different social media platforms. And there's a question that I normally get a lot is, what do you prefer? Do you prefer physical copies or do you prefer digital copies when it comes about, comic books? And definitely it's one of those questions that, it seems that permeates a lot of the conversations in regards to comic book readers. What is the favorite format? What's the best format to read comics? So the answer varies depending on depending on the person, depending on the age of the person, the generation. It depends on income. It depends on your preference and of course your time, if you have time in your hands. It depends. It's a lot of factors that are part of this. So it's not an easy answer. I don't have a problem. I could answer this. I like both. So I want to point out the good and the bad on each format. With the physical, of course, if you grew up with comics, so you grew up going to the comic book store, or even before comic book stores were a thing, when you have to go to the, in this case, the newspaper stand, and you have to get your comics from there, or from the checkout line at any convenience store, any store in a supermarket. So back in the day, we're talking about like 70s, 80s, before that time. So we're talking about the time where you were able to get those. Of course, you prefer, and that's to do a lot with nostalgia. You prefer the physical touch, the feel of a piece of paper in your hands, the smell of the comic book, the newly printed comic book, the colors. It's just all about texture. So that really brings you back to your childhood memories. So yes, a lot of, physical has that ability. And even nowadays, if you go to a comic book store, they're all over the country, all over the world, this the smell of walking into a comic book store, the smell of the comics, the smell of the place, all of that is nostalgia. So physical brings that up. And of course, it's great to have something that you can have in your collection. You can add something that is going to be there as long as you take care, of course, the comic book, or you take care of the books. So it's something physical that really you can have, and there's the commodity to read it at home, just sit down and relax, and just follow the old format. So it's all about nostalgia, I would say, but also about the texture, about the smells, about the feel, about being able to discover the page as you turn it around at your own pace, and being able to kind of look into the different aspects of the drawing, the colors, everything, the panel layout, everything that has to do with just reading a comic book for the first time on a piece of paper. So I think that's the biggest part, or the biggest convenience of the physical format. Now with the digital format, the great thing about it is that of course you don't have to go to a place to purchase. You can simply purchase online. So that saves time, and the time that you spend going to these places. Also, the convenience of carrying this in any format. You can read your comics anywhere in the world. You can carry your collection anywhere in the world because everything is saved to a cloud. So it's easier to download to any device, whether it's a computer, a PC, a laptop, or it could be your your phone. You can be your tablet. So you can download from anywhere in the world, and you can carry those collections. The colors, of course, are clean, so it's not like you're going to damage any books or any pages. You can watch. They remain the same. There's no deterioration over time. So it's just a constant, the ability to read them anywhere, to go anywhere, to carry them with you. So you have to carry your comic books. You can read it at where you are at the bus stop, where you are traveling, where you are in the airplane, where you are at taking a break at work. So it gives you convenience, so you can actually read it in any normal, well, not normal, I would say modern technology, modern device. So you can actually read them anywhere. So it's all about simplicity, I would say. So that's one of the biggest convenience. Now, on the cons, one of the biggest cons I would say for the physical format is the fact that you have to constantly purchase more, and that adds up. So if you lack for space, if you don't have enough space, you have to worry about the space. If you're buying just single issues, you have to put them probably on you protect them, and you have to try to put them in a box or put them in a place just to cover them, make sure that they're okay. So that adds up. If you keep adding more and more and more, you need to buy more boxes. So if you lack space, it's going to be the biggest challenge to have all these comics. And of course, over time, reading through this, regular paper, there's deterioration in the paper, degradation in the paper. So that affects this, and it technically becomes more about collecting the comic book rather than just reading the comic book. So it becomes very difficult. So you have to preserve them, put them back in the little protection bag in your baggies, put it back in the box, put it, and sometimes you have to put them in a place away where, it's not in the way if you're living at home. So you have an attic or you have storage space. So technically you're not reading them, to just preserving them. And it's hard, you have to maintain them. So there is a cost that is involved with it. And if you're collecting this on hardcover books or, even softcover collections, which I prefer over just single issues nowadays, the problem is that you, of course, over time, you're adding more and more and more, you're running out of space. So you have to have a particular space just separated for all of it. And you have to have your books, lined up in proper order. So there's a lot of maintenance, a lot of time that involves with it. And that's the biggest difficulty. Of course, the price point, a lot of them, it's just nowadays collections are hard. If you don't have the money to pay $80, $70, $50, even $100 for a book. So it becomes very challenging to try to get all these collections. So yeah, there is cost involved. There is a space involved. Of course, the degradation over time. So all those things are factors that you have to count in. Now, in the digital part, the cons, of course, is the fact that everything is in the cloud. So technically, even though you own it and you pay for it, one of the biggest challenges that it has is the fact that technically, in the end, you don't really own it because everything's in the cloud. You technically are just paying for permission to read them or to download them to any device. So let's say if a comic book, company or this company decides to shut down, and which it's kind of unlikely, but if the possibility is always going to be there, decides to shut down their service. And I've seen some comic book apps in the past that have done that. They shut down their service, they move on. So technically you're in limbo because you lost everything you paid towards this service. So for, to read these comics through their service. So it becomes, you don't have them. You don't lose, you only paid for in this case, for the permission to read them through their service. So that's the biggest challenge. Of course, the fact that, you don't have the sensory effects that has, having a physical copy. So you cannot smell them. You cannot really touch them. There's no texture because everything is kind of cold within, a phone, within a tablet, whether your, laptop, computer, even with a television. So all these things can really have an effect on the way you read the comics. And, of course, it doesn't feel as natural or as an organic experience as the other ones. And of course, it's as simple as that. Of course, something that I didn't mention before, one of the things is cost. Cost, of course, is one of the benefits of this because, you can actually buy multiple comic books and everything is in the cloud. So you don't have to worry about the space. Of course, everything is in the cloud again. So it's not like you technically own it 100%. So to be honest with you, as I get older, I have come to a place where I do like both systems, although when I started reading comics initially, I was not a fan of digital comics. It was not something that I cared much about it when it came out. I kind of degraded a bit. I kind of just criticized it a bit. But it was until my first experience when I was able to read a digital comic for the first time. And that was in the initial times of digital. It was the time where digital was not as big as it is now. So it was not something as enjoyable. It still has some quirks, some things that it were not as good and it was not as user friendly as it is now. But it has evolved. Over time, a lot of these services have evolved to a place where actually it's very comfortable. And I personally prefer to read daily on my tablet. I read daily on my tablet, on my phone. I found it very, very enjoyable, its experience. I still collect physical. I don't collect any more issues. I have mentioned this many times in through my videos. I just don't like to go and buy more because comics have become so expensive and you don't get too much stories in them anymore. So it's, I prefer to buy collections, like omnibuses, hardcover books, absolute versions, all of that. I prefer bigger collections, and I do that as in a collectible manner. I collect particularly stories that I prefer, that I grew up with, the ones that I really love, the ones that I found praiseworthy. I don't collect everything, and I normally don't buy anything that I haven't read before. And the way I read it is through, in this case, through digital media. Digital has become my way to go to try something, to test it out and see if it works. And if I like it, if it's great, then of course I end up buying a collection, hardcover book later, down the road. And that's how I do it. I love digital because the simplicity of it, the ability for me to go anywhere and read while I'm at lunch break, while I'm taking a break at work, while I'm just probably sitting on in the park, maybe just grab my tablet and start reading. It's simpler that way. It has become so simple. I don't have to read only one single thing. I can read multiple things. I'm the type of person, maybe you have noticed, I speak very fast. I talk fast, I think fast. That's just me. I'm always thinking so many things at the same time. It's just part of how my brain works. So sometimes I can read a book or something and then I move on to the next thing and then to the next thing and to another book and another book. I have to read parts of everything, and I continue to do that. If you look at my tablet today, all my books and comics, I have, tons of them that I'm still reading, and I'll read them all together. It's just how I do things. That's how my brain operates. So it's hard for me to stay still in one thing. So I like that. That's how I like the simplicity of it. I like the ability to carry those things. Yes, sometimes I want to come home and open my, hardcover book or my collections and, read the books, in a simpler setting, more reminiscence of my childhood. But, sometimes, hardcover books can be extremely heavy and big and bulky. So sometimes it's not as simpler as just laying down in bed. You just want to lay down in bed or even on the sofa and, carrying a big book, it just can be cumbersome. So, having a tablet, which is lighter, it's a lot easier. And it's, and they light up, have light up features. So you don't have to worry about the light because even the tablet will light up and has the backlight that is easier to read the stories. And you can control the lighting depending if you're reading at bed. Sometimes I read at bed while my wife is asleep and I'm still reading and I don't have to turn on the light. All I have to do is just, kind of lower, dim the lights on my tablet on my phone and I can read, without a problem until later, late at night, real late and not bother, my wife. So there's a lot of great things that comes with digital and there's a lot of great things with physical. It's just a matter of personal preference and opinion. I'm a convert. I can tell you one thing. I can recommend you digital all day long. It's the way I read it. I still have collections. I know a lot of people dislike the digital part. They prefer physical copies. But as I know, anything can happen. My house, I hope that never happens, but my house can burn down and everything I own can be destroyed. But at least I have the digital media. And that's another great part about digital nowadays. There's a fear that they're going to go out of business. It depends, because I can tell you one thing. I've been reading digital. I particularly read through Comixology, which is owned by Amazon. And, Amazon is really not going out of business now. So, they're the biggest powerhouse and they have connections with Marvel, DC, and all these big companies. So technically when you're buying from them, you're also buying from DC or Marvel. So if something happens, and I've seen that before, with other services, whatever you bought and is connected to Marvel, of course, you can read it through their Marvel app because technically Comixology and Marvel, they have a partnership. So technically whatever you buy through Marvel, it has to instantly show up on Comixology, and whatever you buy through DC instantly, shows up in Comixology and vice versa. Other companies do it separate services like IDW, in this case, Dark Horse, I have their services as well. IDW was with Comixology. When they separated themselves from Comixology, I was able to transfer all my collection from one place to the other. So yes, there is a way that you actually maintain your stuff. It works kind of like in this case to the digital stuff on television, movies. It works like all the services that they use that you can purchase a movie and you can watch it through different services. So it kind of works the same way, so like ultraviolet and all of that. So it works the same way. So I think this is what the future is going, and this is where we're going to see more and more. And in my opinion, it's good. And, there's always good deals, good prices. You can buy a book for $5, a whole 500-page book or 1,000-page book for $5. And that will cost you probably like $80 if you go and buy it, or $40, depending on where you buy it or how old it is or how hard it is to get on physical media. So yes, there's practicality on this. And I always recommend it's better to get the digital first. And if you really fall in love with the art or with the book and the story, then yeah, by all means, go and get the hardcover book. To add to your collection, but at least test it out. If you pay $80 and then you don't like the story, then you're stuck with an $80 book. And the only next step is just to try to sell it on eBay, or trying to sell it to a friend or whatever, or just stay with it. Keep it, till kingdom come, and just just keep adding stuff and stealing and robbing you of your space. So I think this is the practical way to do it. So what do you think? Are you a fan, or do you like it, or do you hate it? What is your opinion about it? Just let me know. Just share your thoughts with me on the comments below, and don't forget, like, comment, and subscribe if you're following me on YouTube. Share this podcast with your friends, and once again, thanks for watching. God bless you, my friends. Talk to you again. Bye bye.